Everyone, welcome to today's video. So friends, for today's video, let us assume that you are the owner of a shop and into your shop you have 15 products. You are launching a new product for your shop and you want to know will this product be fit for the market or not, or will I'll be able to sell this product or not, the new product which you are launching. So what can be one of the technique by which you can get to know okay, this product is a market fit? You can do here is one of the method can be, so all the 15 products which you have, let's say you had a database ready with you of all the customers who have ordered all these 15 products, you have the history of all the customers, all the through the bills or certain procedure you have a history, whichever customer have bought that particular product, you have all the details. Now let's say you're launching this particular new product. Let us call this product as X for now. So for this particular X product, you want to know whether this particular product is market fit or not. So what you will do, one of these method can be, you can just filter out all those customers who had bought these products, the previous products which you had onto your store for the very first time. These can be the customers who have tried all your new products whichever you have launched. So they can be a potential customer who might be interested into buying this new product. So what you can do, from the database which you are having of all the customers, of all their history of their buying behavior, you can just filter out them to the basis of who were the first 5 customers who were buying my new product every time I was launching it. So you can get the details of all those customers who were the very first purchasers or the very first subscribers of your new product, and they like buying a new product every time you're launching it. So they can be a very good potential customers, and you can just reach out to them via calls, via emails, and you can sell your product or the new product which is X. So friends, the very first value or the very first subscriber which you are getting from all these products, all the 10 to 15 different products, you're just sending them emails, those customers, so that they can just try the new product and you can just get the feedback whether this particular product is market fit or not. Friends, this particular concept, you're getting the very first customer, the very first value from your different products. This is known as the first value concept into the SQL. Similarly, let's say you want to get the very latest customer, the very fresh customer who has bought, your very recent customers who have brought all your products, all the 14 or 15 different products which you are having. This value is known as the last value into the SQL. So we'll be seeing how to calculate this first value and the last value from a data set which is having multiple partitions wise. So these products, they can be considered as different groups, and then from each group we are just getting the very first value. From our data set which is having the information of all the products, we are just partitioning our data set from the very first instance, and then we are just getting the first value from all these partitions. So by partitions, what I mean? By partitions, I mean all the different products. Seeing this particular concept, the first value, last value, and the nth value concept, even you can get the 7th value from your data set, 11th value, nth value, you can just get the nth value from your data set as well, from the partitions as well. So we'll be seeing this into much more detail. This particular concept is also asked a lot of many times into the interviews. This though comes into the advanced SQL concept, but you should know these all concepts before you are going to the interviews. It will make you understand this into a very simple way through the help of this particular data set. In the very first column, I have the ID of all the rows. Into the column B, I have the state. Into the column C, I have the date column, and into the column D, I have the sales which has happened onto that particular date into that particular state. So for example, into the Jharkhand state, I have the date as 2206 and the total sales that has happened is 603. Similarly, for all the other rows, you can just assume the same data set as well. Similarly, for all the other rows, the same concept goes on. So friends, here what do we want? So let us assume there was a book fair, and the book fair lasted from 1306 to 2206, and these took place into all these states, Jharkhand, Bihar and Maharashtra. And the sales data I have got here. So for the number of books that were sold into all these states into this particular date, I have the data here. So just assume this particular data set here. Now what do we want? Into the example which I mentioned earlier, I had, instead of state, you just assume these to be product. So these will be product 1, Bihar will be product 2, Maharashtra will be product 3, and similarly for you will be having much more different products data. So you can just assume all the other products have been listed here. So that was the intention of me giving that particular example, but we'll be seeing the SQL query for this. Now what do we want? I want to get the data for each state for the total number of sales which has happened on the very first day of the sale. So the very first day which you can see the sale was taken place is 1306 into each of the state. So the sale took place from 1306 to 2206. So I want to get the data of the total number of sales which has happened into all these states onto the very first day of the book fair. So friends, let us see the SQL query to write to get this particular data. And similarly, I'll be getting the data for the total number of sales which has happened onto the last day of the sales, last day of the book sales. So friends, let us move to my SQL Server Management Studio. I have imported this dataset from before. If you want to know how do we import our dataset into the SQL Server Management Studio, you can watch this video which is popping out right now onto your screen. So let us get that particular dataset. I hope the problem is very much clear. So the syntax for first value is something like, so I'll just write here for the very first instance first value, and inside this we need to mention the column name from which we want to get the first value. So I want to get the first value from the sales column, like the very first, onto the very first date, what is the sales which has happened. And then the other is the, we'll need to provide the over, and after this we need to partition our data set. So all these data sets, all the three states which you are seeing, our code will internally partition these data sets separately, and then it will query upon all these different data sets, all these different partitions which has been created here. So all these different partitions will be created to get the very first sales value which has happened. So friends, let us move to our query. So after this I will be telling our code to partition our data set. So partition by what? Partition by state, and then order by what? So order by what? So order by date, because the very first day data we want. So that is why we need to order our all the partitions which we have created onto the basis of the date column, and from all these partitions, after they have been sorted onto the basis of the date column. For example, this, I'll just make you understand how the code will internally work. See, the data set here is not ordered onto the basis of the date column, like we want to order it into the ascending order onto the basis of the date column. So I would go to this sort and filter. I would filter this from oldest to newest, sort this. So you can see now the data set has been sorted out. After the data set has been sorted out, from the final thing which is done until this particular step here, until order by date, the very first row would be taken into account, and this would be printed into our output, because this is the very first value. Now what if I want to get the last value? The very last row from this particular data set would be taken into account, and this would be pasted here. So this is our last value. Similarly, if I want to get the third day data, so the output I'll be getting the third day data here. It will just be getting into the output here, you can see. So friends, let us move to our screen. So after we have ordered this onto the basis of the date, we'll just close this bracket, and we'll just rename this column as first day sales. That's all. Let us execute this particular query. So you can see for each of the state, the very first day sales data we are getting into each of the row. This is also window function because we are getting all the rows we are getting into present into all the partition by column here or the partition which have been created. So you can see into the very first date 828 in Maharashtra, 828 books were sold, so we are getting 828. Similarly 444 sales were done into Jharkhand into the very first day, we are getting 444 here. Similarly we can get the last value as well. So I'll just copy this, provide a comma, control V, and instead of first value I'll provide this as the last value, and instead of first day sales this is we are getting the last day sales. Okay, before this last day sales, okay, no worries, let us do this only. So last day sales we are getting, and we'll be hitting the execute button. And please pay attention here because there is an exception which is coming right now. I'll just execute this, and if you'll see very much clearly here, the data is quite wrong. So it is just copy pasting the same data set which is present here into this particular column for the last day sales, and we are not getting the last day sales value. So according to our understanding, we should have gotten the last day sales. For example, into the last day 603 books were sold into the Jharkhand state, so into the entire column we should have gotten 603 for the Jharkhand state. And similarly for Maharashtra we should have gotten 925 because into the last date 925 sales book sales were done into the Maharashtra into the entire column. And similarly for the Bihar state 563 books were sold onto the last date, so we should have gotten the 563 values, but instead we are just getting the same column of the sales column into the last day sales value. And that is why I told you to pay a little bit more attention right now, because this is an exception when we are using the last value column. Now why is this happening? So this is happening because the window function, or the how does this work internally. So this works internally something like, so let's say after the partition have been created, now we are telling our code to print the very first value, so it just printed. So the very first row, the partitions have been ordered by onto the basis of the date column. The first row would be copied here and would be pasted somewhere, and we have got the first value. So no problem with the first value. But what is the problem with the last value thing? So the problem happens because internally how does SQL window function works. So for each row it will take into account separately. So for example, it is operating onto the very first row. So if let's say I'm calculating the first value thing here, and into the next column I'll be calculating the last value thing here, it will take into account for the very first instance the very first row. So the first value, what is the first value? So the first value is 444, also the last value is 444. Similarly, I'll take the second column here, I'll just paste this, so it will take this into account. Internally SQL query will take into account the second row because the operations with the very first row has been taken place. Now it will take the second row. Now after it has got the second row, the partition is this particular data set here, just which I have marked here. And from this particular data set, what is the first value? So the very first value is 444. And from this particular data set, what is the last value? The last value is 440. So I'll just write this. So here it will come as 440. Similarly, I'll just do this for the last, the third row, and this will be last example for this. So you can see now what is our data set has become. Internally the data set would accommodate all these three rows now, and from these three rows it will calculate the first value and the last value. So the very first value is 444 here, and from this particular data set here, what is the last value which is present into this particular data set? It is 803, because you can see 803 is the last value, and that is the answer which we are getting here. So this is internally how the SQL window function works. Okay, now you will tell me, Ashutosh, okay, we are getting the same results for last value, but this is incorrect. But I wanted to let you know like how it is calculating internally the last value. This is wrong, I know, but I just wanted to let you know like, okay, internally what is happening right now. So how do we correct this? we can correct this by, as you can see, how does window function works. It takes into account the very first row, then it will append into the very first row the second row, then into that particular data set it would append the next rows. So it will act upon like this. We should wait until and unless we are getting our entire data set of the partition by, and after that we'll be calculating the last value column. So until and unless we'll be telling our code, don't calculate this last value column until and unless we are getting the last or the entire data set which is present, which we are taking into our account or which we are concerned with. Please don't calculate the last value until and unless you have got the entire data set. Now you can calculate the last value. So we need to tell our code this particular thing, because let's say we have got the entire data set here. Now it is very much easy for the code and we'll be getting the correct answer here, because the entire data set has been come from the partition by of the Jharkhand state, and from the entire data set we know, okay, on to the last day the sales has been 603, so the code will calculate the last value column as 603. So for the entire day column 603 would come up, and the first value will remain as 444, because the very first row should come up, and that is only the concern. We are only concerned with that particular thing, like the very first row should come up. But to calculate the last value or the nth value, we should be careful until and unless we are getting the entire data set, because window function works like this internally. It takes into account each row and then it appends the next row and operates into them. Then after the operations has been taken place onto both the rows, it will then append the third row and then operate onto the third row. So this is how internally window function works. So until and unless we are getting the entire data set, we should tell our code, wait, don't calculate the last value, calculate the last value only when the entire data set is ready. So friends, this is how the last value is calculated. Now you will tell me, Ashutosh, how can we make the changes into our SQL query? So to make the changes, you will know this particular concept, which is rows between. I have made a separate video, a detailed video, what is rows between. If I would have to tell this into a very much short, so you can see this particular image here. So whichever current row which we are taking into account, we can action upon the preceding rows and the following rows as well. So if I want to get 2 rows before the current row or take action onto the 2 rows before the current row, I can write 2 preceding. If I want to take action onto the 5 rows following the current row. So why I am telling the current row, because as you can see, I have explained here, window function works like this. It will first of all take the row separately and then it would make the operations here. So window function works like this. It will operate row wise. So you can see this particular image, it will take into account the current row, preceding rows, following rows. What if I want to take the entire data set or the entire rows which are coming before the current row? So for that we'll be using unbounded preceding. Similarly, what if I want to get the entire data set which is following the current row? I'll be using the unbounded following for this. So friends, let us move to our data set here, and I'll be using the rows between concept. So I'll be mentioning here rows between until and unless you get the entire data set. Please don't calculate the last value, only calculate the last value when you have got the entire data set. So for this I'll be writing rows between unbounded preceding and unbounded following. That's all is required here. Okay, I'll just okay, great. Let us execute this code, and you can see we have got the correct answer here. So for the last day for Bihar, 563 books were sold. On the last day, we have got the last day sales as 563. For the last day of Jharkhand, the total number of books which were sold is 603, and we have got here 603. And similarly for Maharashtra, 925. So we have got here 925, and this is how the last value function has been working. So friends, please rewatch this video if you had found this confusing for the very first instance. This is a bit confusing, but rewatch this video and make your concepts much more clear. so that it can help you into the interviews. Over to this, will tell me, Ashutosh, so you had calculated the very first value, last values, last day values. What if I want to calculate the fifth day value, like the total number of sales which has happened onto the fifth day of the sales? So how do we go on to calculate this? So we'll be calculating this using the nth value function. Let us see the syntax for this. So I'll just calculate the value or this total number of sales which has happened onto the fifth day. So I'll just mention here nth value. Onto which column? Onto the sales column. I want to get the data, the fifth data set I want from the partition by. So over again I'll be using the partition by thing here, partition by state, and then order by date. We require to add these rows between unbounded preceding and unbounded following. For this, let us run the query and let us see if we need to add this. Let us execute the query. Okay, so nth value is not a recognized built-in function. So friends, you can see this is throwing an error and it is saying that nth value is not a recognized built-in function. So I think Microsoft SQL Server Management Studio does not support the nth value function. But I'll just tell you one thing, like whenever you are using the partition by thing or you need to use the partition by thing, the problem is demanding you to use the partition by thing, please use this rows between concept, like wherever it is possible, because it is kind of a safety net it provides to you get the correct answer. But if in case you're not using the partition by thing, you can get your correct answer by using this normal order by clause as well. But the syntax, it remains the same, like this particular query would have given the fifth largest value sales value here. So I would just need to add here the same thing, rows between unbounded preceding and unbounded following, 8 rows between unbounded preceding, and yeah, this would have been given the correct result. But the Microsoft SQL Server Management Studio does not support the nth value function. Also, one more thing, into my SQL Server project which I prepared for the portfolio project, the limit function also does not work into Microsoft SQL Server Management Studio. So if any of you had figured out a certain way into how we can run the limit function as well, please do comment down your solution, and that would help me as well as other people as well. As you can see, nth value function is not working. So alternative is you can visit Google. So friends, I hope you had found this video very much useful. So do keep practicing all these concepts, advanced level SQL concepts, and you can crack all the interviews with practice. So friends, do like this video if you had found this video very much informational, and also subscribe to my channel to receive such kind of information if you haven't. See you in the next video. Thank you so much. Bye.